Hello and welcome to the agenda. I am Ajay Kaul. In this program today we will talk about the attack on Chinese assets in Myanmar during protests against coup. Over 1.5 months back, in India's neighboring country Myanmar, the military seized power by ousting an elected government. Since then, the country has been witnessing widespread protests. In an effort to suppress the protests, the military has killed over 150 protesters so far. But the protests are only intensifying and increasing. And now Chinese assets are also under attack, with several Chinese factories being burnt down. So why are the Chinese assets being targeted in Myanmar? We will try to understand the issue in the agenda today. We are joined by senior journalist from Myanmar, Soy Mint. From Delhi, we have with us Ambassador Ashok Sajanhar. But before we start our conversation, have a look at this small report.
In Myanmar, protests have been raging for over a month, ever since the military seized power on February 1 and ousted the elected government of Aung San Suu Kyi. General Min Aung Hlaing, who led the coup, justified the military takeover by claiming that the elections held in November last year involved widespread fraud. The elections, Suu Kyi's party had got an overwhelming majority, dashing hopes of the military, which was supporting the opposition. As the protests got bigger and bigger, the military has stepped up its crackdown against the protesters, and even bullets were being fired directly at the protesters. There have been reports of various other kinds of inhuman treatment by the military to crush the protests. However, people have been hitting the streets without caring for their lives. Adding another dimension to the protest, Chinese assets have come under attack in Myanmar, with several Chinese factories being burned down. The attacks on the Chinese assets came against the backdrop of growing hatred among the anti-coup protesters for China for its support to the Myanmar military. Everybody in China has asked the Myanmar military to ensure the safety of its institutions and personnel. China is supporting the Myanmar military for its strategic interests, which includes its ambitious Belt and Road Initiative, or the BRI project, in which Myanmar is a key element. Given the raging situation, it is likely that protests against China along with the Myanmar military will only grow in Myanmar. Bureau report.
Now let's welcome our guests, Soy Mint from Myanmar and diplomat Ambassador Sajanhar from Delhi. So I'll first go to Soy Mint from Myanmar. Please explain to us what is happening in Myanmar during, protests. We know protests have been going on since military seized power on February 1. So please give us some insight about the situation there.
First of all, the protest from all walks of life and in different parts of the country continue against the military regime and also against the military coup. And the protests are going on daily, despite the fact that the military regime is using brutal crackdown against of them. In many cases, snipers are used to shoot down the protesters. So far, more than 200 peaceful protesters, if I have to be exactly, 202 persons have been killed now. More than 2,000 people have been detained in this period. And the military, there is no way that military is going to reduce their crackdown against the protesters. The people are also intensifying their protest.
So Soy Mint, please explain to us, since as we know, most of the political leaders are in jail or they are under detention. So who is leading these protests?
This there is no one specific leader in this movement. Of course, there is one unity that all of them want the elected government to come back to power. That clearly is necessary for democracy and Aung San Suu Kyi. But here in this, there is the difference now and what happened in 1988.
Right.
Here, the young people are leaders, and so there is no specific leader. But on the other hand, you can see there are many leaders in the movement who are participating and who are leading, and they are using technology, they are using smart tactics to try to avoid the brutal crackdown.
Right. So we have Ambassador, I go to Ambassador Sajanhar. As you heard about the brutal crackdown by the military, now it is almost 1.5 months. The crackdown has been intensifying only. But although UN, etc., USA has condemned. But how do you see the situation? I think there seems to be no light at the end of the day. What do you say?
Yeah, at the moment, Ajay, there doesn't seem to be, from my own vantage point, meaning we are outside here. Mr. Somint is there, so he has his finger, so to say, on the pulse of the situation in Myanmar. And we are reading reports, we are seeing a large number of video accounts of whatever is happening. And of course, many of our TV channels here are receiving messages from many friends from Myanmar. So I think we also tend to get a reasonably accurate and a reasonably up-to-date account of what is happening there. Now, as it would appear that more than 200 people have been, innocent citizens have been killed as of now. The last Sunday, with 38 deaths, was the most destructive in terms of the number of people killed. But the Myanmar army is using live bullets. And I think on the 1st February, when though Aung San Suu Kyi was taken into custody, maybe the people in Myanmar were taken quite by surprise. But then after that, they seem to have risen as one and pushed back against what the army is doing. I think too, I could not hear properly what Mr. Somint responded to your question as to who is leading these protests. But as far as I can make out, there is no single leader as far as these protests are concerned. These are, from different cities, whether it is Yangon, whether it is Mandalay, whether it is Dawei, or the other cities, Bagan, others. I think these are spontaneous upsurge and uprising of the people. I think the people have really tasted the fruits of democracy. They have tasted the fruit, and they are not willing to go back. So maybe this was a very serious miscalculation by the Myanmar army. They thought that in the past, whether it is, in 1962, 1988, 1990, 2007, that they were able to crush the opposition, and there was hardly any sort of opposition, that this time also it's going to be the same thing.
Right.
But they have been it's been a very wrong calculation, and the people have risen. So all credit, all kudos, applaud to the ordinary citizens of Myanmar who have risen up for their rights, for democracy, for freedom, and for liberty.
Right. So kudos to the brave people of Myanmar who have risen against the army. But as you heard, Ambassador Sajanhar was saying that maybe army miscalculated this time. And also I have a question whether is the world community doing enough? Mr. Somint, I am asking you.
Definitely not enough because as you see the wishes and demands of the protesters on the streets, all of us are in dire situation. it is a question of life and death for
Right.
us. Even a delay of 1 day can be loss of many lives. So we want international community to intervene even by the military, through the military intervention, because we have seen decades that the Myanmar military does not care or does not respond to statements
Right.
or mere pressure. Targeted sanctions, yes, partly okay for some time, but the targeted sanctions were not launched, were not get the military put back to barracks. So we need very specific, very active international intervention, including not ruling out the military
Military.
intervention.
You want military intervention by?
Intervention
I mean,
like targeted military strikes, specific military leaders who are responsible for the coup, for the loss of many people, who are responsible for the loss of the democracy. We just had a glimpse of democracy for some years only after decades of fighting, and that glimpse of democracy is now gone. We are now back in the dark age.
right. So do you want that military intervention by the UN or maybe by individual countries like US, NATO? What? How?
We expect democracies, we expect democratic nations to act together. That should, because we are talking about democracy and democratic values. We expect, of course, US and UK and others are important, but the other countries, we are hoping, even the alliance like Quad, QUAD Quad,
Yeah.
should intervene, because it is also a question of China, which is helping the military regime, and so we want the European international democracy being like Quad to
Yes.
act very efficiently, very timely.
I'll come back to you on China factor, but first I'll go to Ambassador Sajanhar about the Somin saying that military intervention should be there by democracies. Do you think it's feasible?
No, I don't think it is feasible. I think there are other ways really to apply pressure on the Myanmar military, because I think the response has to be a gradual, step-by-step, calibrated response. I can see that, things are really getting out of hand. So,
But
it's
Ambassador, sorry to interrupt, but Somin has a valid point that he says, although America has imposed sanctions on the military leaders, it doesn't help. I mean, they don't heed to all these sanctions, and I mean, it doesn't work on them. So, what is the option?
Yeah, no, I quite understand, because sanctions have limited impact. It's only over a longish period of time. We saw, when the sanctions were applied on Iran, for instance, then and for several years, then they had some sort of an impact. But we do not have the luxury of that time as far as Myanmar is concerned. We can see that Myanmar things are really getting out of control. What we have seen now is that so far as the protesters are concerned, they were not responding, they were not reacting. But of late, there have been sort of, fire bombs or Molotov cocktails, etc. And I understand that it is quite reasonable. You cannot really expect people and young people at that to sort of, keep on getting attacked by the military in a very brutal manner and violent manner and not react and not respond at all. So I think it is quite natural and normal. And if this happens, then of course the Myanmar's army will get another excuse that we are being attacked, so self-defense that we are acting and so on and so forth. So I can understand that time is it's not a peaceful time that you can sort of just apply sanctions and wait for them to have an impact. But I think there are players, particularly Myanmar is a member of the ASEAN, and ASEAN can definitely apply much greater pressure on Myanmar, on the Myanmar army, and give them counsel that this is, they are following, they are walking a very, very dangerous path, and it is not going to be helpful for them, because as we can see that whatever it might happen, the final outcome is definitely not going to be what the Myanmar army has been used to, either in the 1960s or in the 1990s. Right now, the young people are definitely
But Ambassador Sagamar, in fact, situation is almost becoming like China, like Tiananmen Square situation, isn't it? After that, there was no uprising in China. Maybe that may be the idea of the military in Myanmar also, to curb it for all.
Yeah, you are right in a manner of speaking that, but let us look at two or three things. Today is 2021, it is not 1989. So, much in terms of information, in terms of news, that can travel much faster today than it could do at that time. Number two, China was even at that time a very, very closed society. The people had not really tasted the freedom. People had not really tasted liberty. Here, at least from 2011 in Myanmar, there was some bit of opening that had been allowed. And then after the elections in 2015 and the Osa Suchi government coming in 2016, over the last 4-5 years, I think the people and the students, they have tasted freedom, they have tasted what democracy, what the benefits of democracy can be in terms of opportunities, even as far as economic opportunities are concerned. And I don't think they are willing to sort of take it lying down. And this is very clearly visible from the fact that although the oppression from the army has been growing, has been increasing, but that has not had any impact whatsoever in terms of reining in the enthusiasm and the energy and the vigor.
Yeah.
And more people, even as far as from the police, the security officials, the monks, the government officials, they are coming out into the open in support of these protesters and against the military forces.
So I'll ask Somint about whether Myanmar is military, as I mentioned about Tiananmen Square incident. So is it, taking lessons from China? Is it why protesters are attacking now Chinese assets and burning down their factories?
Definitely, there is a very close relationship and support in the whole history in many decades from China to the Myanmar military. If there are two countries, that is China and Russia, which are supporting the junta even now.
Yeah.
And there is a very, very strong anti-China sentiment in Myanmar. Particularly
Why?
during this
Why so?
period, people believe that it is China which is giving hands and supporting, including technical support, to suppress the media and to suppress the freedom of expression. That support is coming from China, Myanmar military. And China thinks to have the economic interest, the focus in Myanmar. So, and then even in the Security Council, China and Russia, we to tone down the language. They didn't condemn the military coup. They didn't use the word military coup. So I think that these are all aware by people inside, and the anti-China sentiment is increasing day by day. Regarding the banning of the Chinese factories in Line Daya, the other, it is not clear who banned out. One is there are two reports that we received the video that the two Chinese who are in the factory, working in the factory, saying they are banned down by the security forces. But the military regime is saying these are banned by the protesters
Okay.
to express their anger. But whatever it is, growing China and China's sentiment and anger is there, which is also very alarming because that is also related to the not only Yangon and Mandalay but in different parts of the country. For example, in northern part of Myanmar, where huge Chinese interest is there.
Chinese have, I think the major interest is about BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, for which Myanmar is very key. So do you think that is the main reason that China is supporting whoever is ruling there, or the military which is in
Yes.
power?
Yeah, a few weeks ago, after the coup, there is a confidential meeting between the two foreign ministries of the two countries. China side clearly asked the Myanmar military to make sure that the gas pipeline, which is a part of the BRI,
Right.
as well short term and long term, have to be safe. And Myanmar's military has promised that by putting more security along the pipeline. So Myanmar military is willing and doing to safeguard the interest of China and also the BRI projects in the
Right.
country. And that is clearly known to the people because of the media, because of the social media reports. So that's how the anti-China sentiment is growing.
So China is also the biggest supplier of weapons to Myanmar. So do you think so? I mean that these protests against China will intensify in the coming days?
Yes, protests against whoever is supporting the Myanmar military is definitely well proved because it is the only what they can express because they don't have weapons, they don't have arms, and military regime is using brutalities. The other day, you must have seen they are very inhuman. They don't. It is not a question of killing alone. They even like take away the clothes of the dead body.
I think they buried some woman under cement recently.
Yes, yes, and then they dig even the dead bodies at hand, and they didn't give the dead bodies to the public. So it is inhuman as well. Not only like killing by machine gun. So that increase the angry and hatred
Yes.
by the people across the different walks of life. So whoever is saying to be helping or supporting the military regime will be protected by the people. I don't have a doubt.
Yes, so I'll go to Ambassador Sajan. You heard Soimin about how the anti-China sentiment is growing by the day, and then some experts feel that there is anti-China sentiments in so many other ASEAN countries, so it may have a ripple effect in those countries. What do you say?
Oh yes, I think that's a very real danger. That's a very real danger because I think under the the superficial cover, there is a huge anti-China sentiment. As we can see, it has erupted in Myanmar, and it is, I think, evident in other neighboring countries, whether it is Laos, whether it is Cambodia, whether it is Thailand. You would have seen, very recently there was this milk alliance that had come forth, with democracy supporters, Hong Kong, Thailand, in Taiwan, and many other places, that are against China. So there is this very real risk and threat and danger that the neighboring countries also, anti-China protests might explode.
Spread, yeah.
I don't hear Mr. Somin very clearly, but let me share my own experience in some other countries where China has made investments and where it is sort of focused on its own Belt and Road Initiative. Here, of course, Mr. Xi Jinping had come early last year in 2020, and he had included Myanmar as a part of one country of
Shared destiny. Yeah.
And that is something very, very sort of as far as the diplomatic parlance of China is concerned, that's very special. And of course, it wanted access to the Bay of Bengal as the port of Chakku is concerned. Earlier, it had wanted the PCIM corridor, but that did not go through because India did not agree to that particular project.
Right.
And so it had this China-Myanmar economic corridor. What China tries to do is to have good relations with the elite, with the ruling class, irrespective of who they are, and it doesn't really bother about interests of the citizens, of the people. And I think people in Myanmar are fearing that. They had risen up against, 10 years ago against the Mitsone Dam, because there also they saw that China was, for its own purposes, it was destroying the environment. Then whether taking rupees, taking jade, taking expensive timber from Myanmar. So all these things are against China. But the people feel
right. So we had to close, but I want to ask one last question to Soimin, 1 minute maybe, about India. What are the expectations from India in Myanmar?
India is friend in the history and now as well. I mean, India sheltered me and Myanmar media was established in India in 1990. I was in India for more than 20 years under the previous state of the military regime. So people in Myanmar definitely wants India to help at this time as well. India has been always a friend indeed. Now we are in need of India's support again. Currently, about 300 Myanmar citizens are in India border regions. Many of them are CTM, Civil Disobedience Movement. So please give shelter to them. Some of our guys and girls are also in India's side because we need to continue the fight, continue to report. So please give shelter to them on humanitarian ground. And also please work with democracies, other countries, so that Myanmar military goes back to barrack. This is the fight between Myanmar military and the people.
Right.
Including ethnic minorities in the country are in this fight together. So please support us again.
Right. So you want India to play a more proactive role rather. But we had to close this program today. Maybe we will have another discussion another day. But till then, we wish you well and safety. Thank you, both of you, for participating in this debate.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, Diego.
This is all in the agenda today. Thanks for watching. I'll be back with another important topic tomorrow. Till then, goodbye.